We are up. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the BCB podcast. This is Aaron Washington, and this is number 68 of our weekly installments. So this week, I have Ian McKiernan on the podcast. He was previously with the Atlanta Hawks as a video coordinator for 2 years, and then he worked a little bit in the front office with their salary cap and a little bit of analytics work as well. So, Ian, appreciate you taking the time today to join me and to dive into this free agent madness that we have on our hands.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. It should be fun.
Anytime. So we have a large list of players that have just signed as far as when yesterday's action, when the opening bell kind of started things off at 6 p.m., a little bit earlier than what we're used to typically seeing from the free agent action. But it was nice to get things started at a decent hour. We didn't have to stay up till midnight or 3 a.m. or whatnot to kind of get the action started. So that was nice. But we did have a lot of unexpected moves as well as what we had heard through rumors previously. So to get started, we can go through some of the big signings. But primarily my goal with going through these free agents is to look at the guys that are going to have the biggest impact on their new team. So, of course, that's going to be the big guys like Kemba and Al Horford. We're going to get into them for sure. And then we'll just go down the list, and we have some other guys like Brogdon and Ricky Rubio that I also want to discuss. So to start it off, let's look at Kemba Walker here. He was one of the biggest free agents on the market, as we know, one of the best point guards in the league. It did fantastic work with Charlotte over the past, 7 or 8 years, as long as he's been in the league. So now he is transitioning to Boston, which I believe was part of a 3-team sign-and-trade deal. So, of course, Rozier is going to Charlotte, and then Kemba comes on over to the Boston side. So his deal is worth $141 million over 4 years, and that was a part of basically the 7 to 9 year range for maximum contracts with a new team. So with Kemba Walker going over to Boston, he brings a great level of pick and roll prowess. He's a fantastic scorer, great ball handler, and his shooting is much improved over his early years with Charlotte. So Ian, looking at this deal in a nutshell, do you think this is a good bounce back move from the Celtics, considering they lost a guy of Kyrie's caliber?
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, I think it's the best they could have done given their circumstances. I mean, obviously, I think everyone agrees that bringing back the same team would have probably been best case scenario for them given their situation. I mean, maybe not internally or with the issues they had off the court and chemistry-wise, but as far as bouncing back from a skill perspective, I mean, they didn't have a ton of options. This allows them to get a max caliber player and pay them, which they didn't have the ability to do with their room. And so I think it sets them up to at least be competitive. Now, they still need to add some pieces, but as far as replacing a player like Kyrie Irving, I think they did as good as they could have done. Now it's up to them to figure out who the Horford replacement is going to be and Baines and really shore up that big man rotation. That's what they have to do now. And, I don't know, they don't have a lot left to work with. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it minimum, but they have playing time available to offer. And, Brad Stevens and good young talent with a potential to compete in the East. I mean, the East seemed to get a lot better with the initial deals that we saw. But I think as far as the options they had available, this was a great move for them.
Absolutely. This is probably the best secondary option you can bring in after losing a guy like Kyrie Irving. And you mentioned that they still have to fill in some pieces, and that basically boils down to the front court rotation. They lost a guy like Horford. They traded away Baines to Phoenix previously as well, so they don't even have his backup on the roster. So basically what they're left with right now is Robert Williams at that center position. Tice is a restricted free agent, and then they have guys like Ojale and Yabusele who probably won't get a lot of playing time. So they do have a few options on the market. I would look at a guy like maybe Capella or not Capella, but that was Kevon Looney. I was thinking of Kevon Looney.
Yeah.
You got a guy like Looney. You have a guy like maybe Willie Cauley-Stein that you can look at. Guys to shore up that center spot, because that's the biggest issue right now, the biggest area of need. So if you could find somebody to at least come in for a year or two to shore up that position, you're looking a lot better. As far as the resources on hand, they have the room exception for about $4.7 million, which they can use for one of those guys, maybe on a 1-year deal, just to kind of try them out and see how it works. But as far as cap room, they're basically out of that space. They're down to about 1.4 million, so that's only enough for a minimum player. So not a ton of options left for them at the front court, but there are still a few good big guys in the market. So I'm pretty confident they'll find a guy to come in and fill the role that Horford had, but just on a much lower level, because as we know, Horford is with Philadelphia, and it's hard to replace a guy of his caliber. So I like the move. Kemba's going to do great work for them, and they should be in the mix for home court advantage again. And then hopefully he'll be a better guy in the locker room than Kyrie was, because we know Kyrie, didn't have the best relationship. So that should help as well.
Well, Aaron, we got live reaction number one. Things are crazy right now. I got Enes Kanter to the Boston Celtics to show up that big man.
Wow. Right on time.
Not sure what the deal is, but my guess is it's either for that mid-level, somewhere in that mid-level, or the minimum. But I completely agree with your assessment. I think Kanter is a solid offensive option for them, and they probably feel like they have the defensive tools to work around him, because he's never been the best defensive guy, but he can get his double doubles and really be the big man inside. But I like that Looney option, and especially with the hard cap issues that the Warriors are going to have with the Russell sign-in trade, it should be kind of easy to peel him off with a restricted free agent offer. But yeah, it looks like he's taking that room exception. 2 years, $10 million is what they have reporting right now. So I like that deal for them. I thought Kanter did a good work in the playoffs this year for the Trailblazers, given their circumstances. I mean, when Nurkic went down, I thought they were kind of dead in the water, but he came in and filled that gap for them. So hopefully he can do the same for the Celtics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the timing couldn't have been any better for the signing. As we're talking, he go ahead and signs, $10 million over 2 years. Second year is a player option, what's being reported. So his salary probably fit right into that room exception I just mentioned earlier, probably just under $5 million. So definitely a very good value for them. He could step in and be the starter or the backup if they have other plans. So he's very versatile in that aspect. So looking good for the Celtics. Good bounce back. Their ceiling might not be as high as it was last season with the caliber of talent they had on the roster, but still they're going to be very competitive, and that wing rotation by itself is going to give them a chance to be very competitive in pretty much any game they're in. So speaking of Kyrie Irving, he's linked to all of this, and it's funny what a difference just a few months make in the NBA. As we remember, looking back to earlier in the season, he said, I would love to be back if you guys would have me. Those were his words. And he made a complete pivot, just didn't feel like Boston was the right fit, whether it was his teammates or the system. He just didn't like it enough to stick around. So he's headed to the Brooklyn Nets along with Kevin Durant. So Kyrie is going to get that 4-year, $141 million deal as well, same as Kemba Walker. The years of service are about the same for the two of them. For Kyrie and KD, the dynamic, we're going to have to wait another year to see that in action since KD is rehabbing. But still, Kyrie coming over to Brooklyn, they still have Karis LeVert. They still have Joe Harris, guys like Jared Allen. So they're looking at a very formidable unit, although this year is not going to be the year to make the ultimate leap to the finals or compete for a championship that comes later. But in the present tense, the present term, they're looking very good. DeAndre Jordan is coming along. We'll look at him in a second. But they're a very strong team now. Kyrie is just the guy they're looking for to kind of top off the rebuild that they've been working towards for the past 5 years. So in your experience, Ian, have you seen a team make a bounce back, a comeback of sorts like this? It's almost unprecedented that you can have almost no assets on your roster and then end up with two of the best players in the NBA. I'm just absolutely blown away by the work that front office has done over the past 4 to 5 years.
It's really unbelievable, man. I mean, we've seen them go from, the most asset-poor team in the league, at the bottom of the league over and over again without the draft picks to get themselves better and to use the resources they had to take on salary, to get draft picks and to, go to different markets. I mean, just to pick up these international guys. I mean, Quirks for them was an interesting player last year that they picked out of the international market that, we hadn't heard a lot about. So they've shown that the ability to be creative. And then, ultimately being in New York, you have this advantage being in Brooklyn. And we see like these players want to play in big markets. But I think they have smart contracts on their books. Their highest paid player before these signings next year was about to be Spencer Dinwiddie, who was on a below market contract, basically from how he performed. He would be, in line to get 15 to 20 million this year, probably, just given the point guard market, if he was a free agent. So to be able to bounce back and sign all these guys. And then on top of it, they used their room exception to go after Garrett Temple. So I think their situation, he's an older player, but good defender and adds shooting for them. So I think that they've done a great job putting together this team. And I really like the idea of them having a year without Kevin Durant because of the youth that they have on this team. So that's more reps for Taurean Prince, who they acquired from Atlanta, more reps for Kurix, more reps for Karis LeVert, just to get those guys used to playing in the system. And Kevin Durant, obviously one of the best players on the planet, he comes back, you can plug him in, I think, no problem. The way he plays, just his ability to catch and shoot and his ability to score all on his own. It's just going to be great to get everybody else touches in that system for a year before you bring him back into the fold. So I'm excited to see what they can put together this year. And then obviously moving forward, they look like they can be a contender. So.
Yes. I mean, without a doubt, Brooklyn has become one of the most interesting stories in the league, because they seem to strike a very good balance between the youth movement that you mentioned before and some of the top-end talent. And that's pretty much the balance that you need to win a championship. As we saw with Toronto previously, they have guys like Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Gasol that are established and some of the best players at their position, but they also combine that great youth movement with guys like Siakam on board. So that balance really lends itself to being one of the best teams in the league if we're looking at recent history. Now, their cap sheet is completely maxed out as well as would be expected. Team salary stands at about 116 million right now, with guys like Durant, Irving on the roster, DeAndre Jordan making 10 million. But Garrett Temple I think was a very good signing, a very good value signing at just under 5 million, about with the same money that Cantor's going to make. Very good 3-and-D type player, a good sturdy wing player that can come in and give a valuable minutes for maybe 20 to 22 a game, spot minutes. So I like what they're doing here, running out a nice full roster. My only question here is how they're going to fit that front court with DeAndre Jordan and Jarrett Allen there. Jarrett Allen was the starter. He seems to have a brighter future. His ceiling is clearly higher than the way DJ is right now. So if they bring DJ in as a starter, that makes me a little bit worried about Jarrett Allen's growth and progressing. This is only his third year, I believe, so he has a lot more growing to do, and I don't want that to be stymied by DeAndre Jordan's presence. So that's probably my only question in all of this, but I'm sure they're going to be able to work it out. And then as we go forward, hopefully that DeAndre Jordan's presence diminishes a little bit, making room for Allen to assert himself and really reach that pinnacle of what we believe he's love as a player.
Sure. I completely agree. It seemed a little bit odd, and I think it's kind of one of those situations in the league where you have to do everything to recruit guys, and it sounds like Kevin Durant and DeAndre Jordan are really close friends. So for them to be able to bring him on board to get KD to commit, maybe that was part of KD's commitment. You can't really put a price on getting Kevin Durant to have to pay DeAndre Jordan now. I would hope, along with what you said, that the Nets know that DeAndre Jordan is not their center of the future. He might not be their center right now. But I would hope that Jarrett Allen is put in a position to close games at the center position. I think starting is really irrelevant at the end of the day. You can have a fake start. DeAndre Jordan comes in and plays 20 minutes a game, but he's and Jarrett Allen plays 28 minutes a game, but he finishes the game. I'd love to see something like that for them. And I also think this just gives Jarrett Allen a buffer to continue to work on his game, continue to improve. He doesn't have to perform every single night. If you have a guy like DeAndre Jordan that can play solid minutes and contribute, you can continue to to improve, and then hopefully at the end of this contract, or they'll both be coming up at the end at the same time. They can commit to Jared Allen long term if they believe that he is their center of the future then. And in the interim, hopefully over time that transition is a little bit more seamless. But for the time being, we'll probably see Jordan start. I just hope, like you said, that it doesn't hurt Allen's growth going forward.
Yep, absolutely. One more point on Kyrie Irving. I think it's important to note that last year was one of the best years for him, at least as far as shooting the ball. I mean, he was at about 56% effective field goal percentage. His 2-point percentage was the second highest of his career, and his 3-point percentage was about the third or fourth highest of his career. So he was all around the board, across the board. He was a very effective offensive player, and that resulted in a second-team All-NBA appearance. So a guy like Kyrie Irving by himself is going to at least push this team to a mid-C finish in the East. And then overall, as your second option, so if KD comes back next year and those guys can coexist, KD is back to being the guy, which is why I think you want to make a move like this. Kyrie is the so-called sidekick or, second option like he was next to LeBron. You can't have a better guy in that role as your second option. So the two of them should be able to make waves in the East for quite some time. And then as long as they manage their money right with incoming extensions for Allen, I'm sure, and LeVert, then things are going to look very, very nice for them going forward. So two of the point guards are off the market. Let's shift our focus to the wing rotation here. So obviously the elephant in the room here as far as wings go is Jimmy Butler. He is the guy that I think a lot of us expected would resign with the Sixers, but what I've heard is they didn't offer him a 5th year, and that's why he decided to want to make that move to Miami. So in this deal, which is actually still being worked out as we speak, the money isn't all the way there, but he will Miami if it does go through, and some of the other pieces are being moved around. But basically, if we narrow this down to the most important aspects, Josh Richardson is going to the Sixers. So I think for both sides, that's a very good swap. Jimmy for Miami is going to be the shot creator that, needed for a long time, considering that they were one of the worst offensive teams in the league. And then, Josh being in the Sixers, I love that for them, having a guy that can come in and be not quite a replacement to J.J. Redick, but offer some of the shooting and way better defensive ceiling. So from that aspect, I love the move from both teams. And as long as it goes through, I would hate for it to get shut down at this point. Then I think both teams did themselves a huge favor, considering all the pieces that were at play here.
I agree. I think that it's a great move for both sides. And you look at that Philly rotation, I mean, that's going to be one of the best defensive teams in the league with Ben Simmons at the point guard, Josh Richardson at the 2, Tobias Harris, Al Horford, and Joel Embiid. I mean, I don't know, where teams are going to score against them. It's going to be remarkable now. How they can create offense could be an issue. That they relied a lot on the shooting of J.J. Redick, who they lost in all of this. But I think what you said for Miami created a really interesting roster a couple of years ago where they tried to go for the a lot of role players, almost like the LA Clippers did more successfully this year, where they had a ton of role players, like a ton of depth, but they didn't have anybody on this team other than maybe Goran Dragic 3 years ago who could really create their own shot and create offense. So I think adding a piece like Jimmy Butler unlocks a lot of those other pieces for them, the Dion Waiters, the James Johnsons, the Kelly Olynyk's, depending on who actually winds up being in the trade. If they can get it done, I think that really unlocks things for them. And maybe they can get them, the vision that they saw for that roster, because right now it just looks like a lot of money tied up in a lot of players who aren't good enough. But if they get that one piece at the center to center all those players around, I hope that they can kind of see their vision through. But that's more of we'll have to wait and see how it all works out with Jimmy Butler.
Absolutely, Ian. In the short term, they look like they're making all the right moves. The question becomes, though, in the long term, is management going to be willing to spend the money necessary to keep this core together? Looking at their books for this year and next year, it doesn't look bad, but we have to remember that Ben Simmons' extension hasn't kicked in yet. So in 2021, that will begin, and I'm assuming that's going to be close to 30 million off the bat. So if you add that in, you're close to luxury tax territory, and then you have to worry about bringing in the role players to support that very good starting five. That's one of the best in the league, if not the best. But as we know, you have to have the pieces to supply the needed, balance for that team. So, I mean, they have some young players on hand. Zaire Smith, and Matisse that came on board in this draft are very good. They still have Jonah Bolden, but that's only about 9 players on the roster under contract. So after that, you're going to have guys coming in for minimums and things like that, veterans. And then Ben is going to be up for a huge paid raise. So if they can find a way to keep it together, that's the big challenge. Then they're going to be looking good, going forward into the future. Going back to the Heat for a second, Jimmy creates a interesting dynamic here because you're sending out maybe Dragic, maybe Kelly Olynyk. We'll have to wait to see how that finishes out. But they're competing against the hard cap here, basically the salary cap apron. So this year is going to be tight. But next year, they open up some space that they have room to maybe make another big splash. But that's in the future. For now, on court, they're looking a lot better. It's just going to be kind of more of the same this year. They might top out at 43, 44 wins. But at least for Jimmy, I like that he has a culture and a team that seems to fit him like a glove, because he's all about business, working hard, just going in there and getting the work done. And that's what Miami does very well. So I think as far as a team fit, this is the best that he could have ever wanted. And once another star comes in to support him, they're going to be one of the best the East has to offer. So if they can just find that second star, then this is obviously worth the risk for Miami.
I agree, and the thing I think that's important to note about them too is their depth. Especially with the trade they just made. I mean, if they can hold on to Derek Jones, I know that was part of the issue with the Mavs, but if they can hold on to him, they just picked up Myers Leonard and Mo Harkless from the Trailblazers for Hassan Whiteside. So that's just 2 more pieces. I mean, they're assembling a roster that up and down works a lot of different ways. A lot of like-size guys. So maybe they're looking to switch more, but at least if they, like you said, if they can get that star, they have the depth, I think, to compete well into the season, to sustain through injuries and anything else that might come up. So they should be an exciting team to keep an eye on if this trade goes through.
No doubt. They'll just have to kind of work through the gymnastics right now, because I'm looking at their salary sheet and it's just a whole giant puzzle of contracts. They have basically the maximum amount of contracts on the books right now, and then about 4 non-guarantees. So they have to worry about trading players, getting the salaries to match. So I wouldn't want to be one of those cap guys in the Miami boardroom right now. I'm sure that would be a very stressful situation. Just for a second here, Ian, would you want to maybe enlighten the people that are wondering how this all works behind the scenes, being someone that works with the cap and analytics and things like that, since you have the experience, in a situation like this, what typically goes into it? Like how much effort and time really goes into making a deal like this work for all the parties involved?
Sure. I mean, I've only been around for 4 years, but then there's nothing harder than figuring out a trade in the NBA, because everybody's values their own players differently, and everybody's situation is unique, and they're trying to get to their goals. A trade like this that's so close to the end, you wind up just flipping through the salary book over and over and over again. Like, where can we send this money? Who are potential trade partners? You have it all up on the board. You're making phone calls. You're crossing things off. You're seeing if adding 2nd-round picks gets you anywhere. You don't want to show your hand and say, hey, we need to do this. I mean, obviously that's the situation that Miami's in right now, which is, it's really a sucky position to be in, because the other team has you over a barrel in a sense. Like, you can't get Jimmy Butler unless you cooperate with what we want. And sometimes that means pay a king's ransom to get a deal like this to go through, to send Goran Dragic to the Mavs, which may not be a terrible move for the Mavs at the end of the day anyway. they could say, hey, still, we're going to need a first-round pick to make this happen. And Miami, who's already out a couple of first-round picks, is probably just like trying to find anywhere else in the league where they can send these contracts to make it work. But, that's the problem with these 3-team deals. These, sometimes get as far as 4-team deals. It's just like all it takes is one team to drop out, and you just have to restructure the whole thing. So you're working on a lot of contingencies at the same time. But honestly, a lot of the times, like, it's 2 guys on the phone with each other going back and forth, and the rest of the people are working out the math and how it's going to work and what are the little, could we throw in a non-guarantee? Could we take back a non-guarantee? How do we save them money? How do they save us money? Like, you're trying to value each thing from both sides and line it up so it makes the most sense. But it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun, man. It's a really interesting room to be in this time of year, to see, like, everything's going on. You're hearing rumors. You're assessing all your options, and it's just
it's
a
yeah.
lot of fun.
I would say that if you want to be in a field like that and you really enjoy breaking work like that or doing work like that, you got to be committed, because it seems like a 24/7 gig. I see guys online. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jeff Siegel, but he does the work on the Early Bird website, which deals with a lot of cap work, and I'm actually using it as a reference right now. And it's just constant updating, constant adjusting and tweaking salary numbers and things like that, which is really cool if you're into just being one of those guys. I mean, all the pieces fit, and you just want to be a problem solver. It's a very good, interesting field to be in. But going forward into another team that has a lot of work to do on their cap numbers here, that would be the Warriors. They also have some trimming to do if they want to make this deal work. So you alluded to this a little bit earlier, and it was a sign-in trade concerning D'Angelo Russell. You asked anybody that has anything to do with the NBA a week ago if this was even possible. Everybody would have gave you a 99% chance this would not happen. This is completely out of the blue. We did not think that this, could occur, but here we are. D'Angelo Russell with the Warriors. Iguodala is on his way out. He's a buyout candidate. Could be heading to Houston. We don't know yet, but there could be a lot of cap casualties here. I would think that guys like Jordan Bell, Looney, Sean Livingston will be on their way out to make room for the quote-unquote new Splash Brothers. So looking at all of this at a nutshell, most of us think this doesn't make any sense from a fit perspective, both financially and on court. So I don't think this is a good deal for them. There's going to be a lot of casualties here. Their depth is going to suffer. Long term, I'm not even sure if Russell will be worth this contract. So I want to get your viewpoint on this. Are you with the camp that thinks this is a bad deal, a bad fit, or could there be some kind of underlying reason as to why the Warriors would sacrifice so many of their key role players they've had for years in order to come in and bring in a guy that's somewhat unproven still, and D'Angelo Russell?
Yeah, I'm on board with everybody. I don't think it's a great fit. I don't see it the way apparently they see it in Golden State. It's a lot of money to pay to a player who I don't think has proven he's worth that much, especially over the amount of time they're doing so. Right. So in that regard, I think it's a little dicey on how this team looks going forward. I mean, the 3 of those guards are, the scoring will be off the charts. There's no question about that. But the thing that made the Warriors so special was their ability to turn up the defensive intensity. When it was necessary. They were a juggernaut on offense, and then in the playoffs and when they really needed to, they could, hold teams to a 17-point quarter and go off in the third, and they'd be they'd be up 30. So to lose that a little bit with a Steph and D'Angelo Russell backcourt at this point, with Clay out for a while, that concerns me. Offensively, I think they'll be fine. I think the fit's great, but again, the depth suffers. And what we're looking at, though, is how else would they have added to this team? Because had they not acquired D'Angelo Russell in a sign-and trade now, they're looking at Klay Thompson's contract at the max next year at that $32.74 million. They're looking at Draymond Green making close to $20 million, Steph Curry making $40 million. I mean, there wasn't going to be a lot of options for them to add a player of his caliber. So maybe for them, they're saying, hey, this is one of the best young players on the market. He comes here, he puts up numbers, we keep winning because we're the Warriors, and then he's a superstar we can trade out for depth pieces when we get Clay back. Maybe that's their play here, but to me, that's a real risky bet to take on a player who hasn't shown the ability to score efficiently. He was an inefficient player with a high volume last year. His pick and roll, but you got Steph. So I think their biggest issue, and it has been for the last couple of years, is their depth. They've got the star talent, but now how do you build depth when you have close to $100 million locked up in, or $90 million locked up in 3 guys, 4 guys now, 4 guys at $105 million. It just doesn't really add up mathematically. So they're either going to need a cap jump or they're going to need to make some trades to really figure something out here.
Yeah, man. With D'Angelo coming on board, your concerns are very warranted. He only shot 55% at the rim last year, which is in the 34th percentile, according to Cleaning the Glass. His mid-range was very good, at least from the short mid, at about 46%. He was in the 15% of the league at that. But the concerns remain with drawing fouls. He wasn't very good at getting to the line, creating easy points for himself. A lot of those shots that he converted last year were a result of basically the shots he'd taken earlier in his career, but they were converting at a higher clip. So he still took difficult jumpers, off-balance threes, a lot of contested floaters, which, if he has the right personnel next to him, maybe like a guy like Curry to take some of the pressure off of him, maybe the numbers will continue to remain steady or even go a little bit higher. So there are concerns. There's a risk-reward factor here that's very prominent. But, from certain aspects, I can understand why they make this deal. But I would just feel like it would be a better use of resources to go after a guy that's a wing or a big, because they already have 2 guards that are some of the best in the league. So it could be a little bit redundant, but at least you have a guy that can come in and fill the role, or somewhat of the role that Clay had, since Clay is going to miss probably a large portion of next season. So from that point of view, I guess it makes sense. But yeah, the Bucks are still very convoluted. You go down the list, they're already at about $137 million in team salary, and then once Clay's boost is here and Draymond is eligible for an extension next year, that only becomes more challenging. So I'm sure they'll figure it out. The talent will be there. It's just they're going to have to find the supporting players to go along with them. So we're looking at supporting players. Speaking of supporting players, a guy that was a key contributor last year for a title contender, but is finding himself in a new role as a starter, is Malcolm Brogdon. Now, Brogdon is one of the most unique players in the league because he posted a 50-40-90 season last year, which is one of the most rare accomplishments that you can really find yourself in as a player. He did that as basically like semi-starter or semi-sixth man, which is almost unheard of. So he comes in with a 4-year, $85 million deal with the Pacers. Looks like a very good deal on paper, along with Oladipo once he comes back. So they're going to be one of the most interesting teams in the league with some of their other deals. So with Indiana, they're Brogdon. There are injury concerns, but if he can stay, relatively healthy, he's going to be a great asset to Indiana. But one question I did see online was that a lot of his shots that he converted were of the uncontested variety. So now that more pressure is going to be applied to him without a guy like Giannis to take the pressure off, do you think maybe those numbers decline, or is he good enough to sustain some of those all-time great numbers that we saw from him last season?
Yeah, I think we'll see a decline in his performance a little bit. I mean, 40-50-90 or 50-40-90 is tough to sustain. Even the best players, have a hard time getting anywhere near that. I think that though the way this team is constructed, with Oladipo when he does come back, that's another downhill kind of player who can take the pressure off of him, create shots for him. They've got good spacing. If Warren can keep up the shooting that showed early last year before he had that bone bruise in his ankle that kept him out a lot of the year. They picked up Jeremy Lamb. Miles Turner has shown the ability to stretch the floor. And then Sabonis being a good passer out of the post. I think I like the construction of this team. They've added depth without going, anything crazy that, they had to let go of Bogdanovich, who I thought was a great player for them last year. I do think that they're, going to need to add a few pieces. But in the East, I still think they can compete for a solid playoff spot. And we'll see when Oladipo comes back how that fit is, because I think he's going to be a great player to have on the ball with Oladipo out. And then when he moves off the ball, he showed he could do that with Giannis. But it's going to be interesting to see how that transition takes place on this new team, with new personnel. But I really like what they've done so far, and they've obviously got to fill out a few more spots on the roster. But so far, I really like it.
I'm with you. I think we have the best offseason so far, along with the Jazz. So you're adding in a guy like Brogdon. You already have T.J. Warren acquired in a trade from Phoenix not too long ago. Jeremy Lamb, as you said, is a very strong pickup. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league, at least if we're looking back at last season's performance. But the great thing about Indiana is they have a strength in numbers mentality. Oladipo is clearly a high-usage player. He demands the ball a lot of the time, and rightfully so. But they have typically had a lot of players next to their star that can contribute at a high level. This team is always going to look a lot different because they had so many free agents on the market, a lot of unrestricted guys that have moved on, but they did look a little bit farther down the line. They knew that Bogdanovich is probably going to sign somewhere else, so they brought in T.J. Warren, and then they brought in Goga through the draft. So maybe they're looking at moving Sabonis pretty soon. That could be another possibility. But overall, they're in a very good position. They still have a little bit of cap space to work with. They have room exception. So this is not one of those teams that's going to be sky high into the luxury tax, paying through the teeth for the next few years if things hold steady. They're going to have flexibility while maintaining a level of depth that is not seen in many teams around the NBA. So across the board, this is a great signing for Malcolm Brogdon. It's just we're going to have to see if he can maintain that level of play through added pressure, added attention defensively, and he can continue to stay healthy because he did have foot issues a little bit last year. So if that remains steady, of course, they're looking good. Now, I was a little bit interested in this, or I wouldn't say confused, but I was a little bit intrigued by the parameters of this deal because it was a sign and trade with Milwaukee. And I think now for Milwaukee, this is a huge loss because of what he meant to that team. Was it really smart to perform a sign and trade with Indiana? Because it's not like they need the picks. But Brogdon was such a key contributor. I think it would have been worth keeping him around by just matching the offer since he was restricted. So not really sure what the thinking is behind that. I just think that they're going to take a step back last season as a result.
I can see that. I think that in these situations, what a lot of teams will do is set their number. If it's above this, we won't match. And this is a rich deal for Brogdon, who didn't play the full season last year. He's had shown some injury concerns. It was his first time shooting at that level, and I think that they felt like they had a good alternative in bringing back George Hill, and they also got an asset as well as created a trade exception. So it's basically like Indiana paying Milwaukee to not match, right? Like that's essentially what they did, and they created. I think it's somewhere in the range of a $12 to $14 million trade exception, based on depending on what his first year salary is. So they can use that later in the season to bring somebody in all the way through if they think that they need that extra piece. I think that's good for them. But I agree. I mean, I think that the Milwaukee we'll see next year at the start of the year is going to be a worse team than we saw at the end of the year this year, and we're just going to have to see what they can do and who can step up for them to fill the void, fill the gap. But I mean, those are the bets you have to make. I mean, $24 or $20 million a year, Malcolm Brogdon. A lot of people might say that's rich based on his track record. Has he really proven that worth? That's a lot of money. And you got the Giannis extension coming up, so maybe they thought 4 years, not loving it. So hopefully they can find a good replacement, somebody to really take over, shoulder his load. And maybe they thought they played well enough without him down the stretch that they didn't need him. I mean, we'll obviously never know exactly what it was, but they definitely have to pick up that production from somewhere. So we'll see what they do.
That is a good point, adding in the fact that they got a trade exception and, they could be looking at another option. I'm sure they have a contingency plan in mind, whether that was George Hill or somebody else. That is a little bit rich for him, I would agree. You don't just pay anybody $85 million. They have to be a strong contributor at just about every level to warrant a contract like that. So definitely some great points there, and it's something we can keep in mind as we go forward with some of these other signings. Sometimes it's not always readily apparent at first glance why teams do this, but you've been behind the scenes. You know that teams don't do anything without a reason or a contingency plan to make up for maybe losing an asset or two that contributed at a high level for that team. So a player that's connected to the Pacers here, did a lot of great things last season, is Bogdanovich, Bojan Bogdanovich. He's headed to Utah now, so he gets a rich deal of his own at about 4 years, $73 million. Now, I was joking around with my friend last night, and we were saying that basically, Bogdanovich is like another version, like almost like a clone of Joe Ingles. I mean, they even look a little bit similar if we're just looking at, how they are on their general appearance. So it's kind of funny to think about it that way. But I think on court also they're a little bit similar. I mean, they're similar size. They play generally the same position, generally the same strengths and weaknesses. So from the Jazz, I mean, it always helps to have another guy like Joe Ingles. I mean, he is a very good player, a high-level contributor. But I'm interested to see how far Bogdanovich can take them. They have Conley now. Bogdanovich is on board. They did trade away Derek Favors, but overall, it's looking like they're gearing up for a big run. And I think if the Warriors are not in the fold, then it's worth making a move like this, presumably to at least get to the conference finals, if not farther. And, Gobert is rightfully excited about what's going on here. Donovan Mitchell is finally going to have a guard to take that load off of him. So his percentages should be on the up, on the rise. So altogether, looks like a good deal. And Utah is definitely on track to have one of the best off seasons of anybody in the association right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think a lot of people would attribute it to the kind of the demise of the Warriors and the shakeup in the West that's going on right now with Houston and Golden State being so unsure. Utah saw it as their opportunity to go all in, and they traded for Mike Conley. And I really like what they've done. I mean, they've always been kind of that drive and kick, keep it churning offense from Quinn Snyder that Quinn Snyder has put in. So to have those similar players with all kind of the same skill set in a sense, while it seems redundant, it kind of plays into exactly what they want to do. To get a quality backup center and Ed Davis as well, I think was for the room mid-level, I believe. That same $10 million two-year deal we've been talking about. To pick up him as well, I think that was a great depth piece for them, because I think that's where we'll have the most questions for them. They've got Connolly, Mitchell, Ingles, Bogdanovich, but who's going to be the four for them? Maybe they play Gobert and Davis together a little bit like they did last year, but is Georges Niang going to be their starting four? Are they going to have Bogdanovich and Ingles, kind of trade off and maybe switch on those guys there? But as far as their backups go, I mean, they have to cut Raul Neto to do the Mike Conley trade. They've got Dante Exum at the backup point guard. They got Royce O'Neal, and they got Georges Niang. But after that, how are they going to fill out this roster? Hopefully, people see this as a place to kind of go for the minimum, maybe. And we could see some guys who are maybe on the buyout market or get cut that that think this is the best place for them. I mean, but we're going to have to see how that plays out before we can say that they've really created a deep or, full team there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they have some more pieces to fill in. I mean, notably the 4 is a little bit thin right now. But I guess you could slide in maybe Ingles there in a pinch if you need a little bit of help. Niang maybe a little bit, but it would help to have a full-time 4 on that roster, preferably a stretch 4, because Gobert definitely does a lot of his best work right around the basket. He's going to need to be in a position to roll to the rim and catch lobs at all times. So there are some options out there. I don't know off the top of my head who they could target, but I'm sure they'll find somebody that can at least step in for a little bit, maybe to start or maybe just to finish the game next to Gobert that can do some damage. But overall, they've managed things very well. They've made a lot of great signings so far. Even with Bogdanovich making a large sum of money for 4 years, I think they're doing all the right things, and they're well in position to make a good run, a good maybe finals run. We'll have to see. But, this just proves that you don't have to be in LA or Miami or Philly or Boston to make a move like this and to be a contender. Utah is doing great things right now. New Orleans, as we know, and then even Memphis is rebuilding very smart right now. So typically these small markets have problems bringing in big-time players, but if you're right about drafting, if you're right about making smart value moves in the offseason, then you're in a just as good a position, if not better, than some of the best markets in the league. So let's actually shift over to one of those large markets real quick. Philadelphia did get Al Horford, and I think the biggest winner in this deal is actually Joel Embiid. We just have to go back to the last 2 playoffs to see that how poorly, at least by his standards, that Joel Embiid performed against Al Horford. So not having to deal with him anymore on the opposing team, that by itself is going to be one of the best stories here for the Sixers. So that deal is a little bit risky from a length perspective for 4 years, but they do have a lot of size. Their shortest guy now in that rotation is 6'6" at Josh Richardson. So 4+ defenders. Then Tobias Harris can do a good job in the post at least. So looking at it from all sides, they're a huge team with a lot of talent, and they should be one of the favorites, if not the favorite, to make the finals from the East just because of that high-end talent they have at basically every position.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think, again, we're just dealing with a team, and I think we're seeing this a lot with just the amount of money that these guys at the top end make. They're just lacking any type of depth. I think that those guys next to each other, I like the idea of, you have Ben Simmons as your point guard. Josh Richardson has shown the ability to shoot some. Tobias Harris can shoot some. Al Horford can shoot some. And even Joel Embiid. I think the 3-point shooting for those 4 other players is going to be a huge determining factor in how well this team performs. Hopefully they can pick up some cheap scoring options. There's still a lot of 2s out there, or 2s, not really 3s, but more on the 2 side. I mean, Wesley Matthews. Even then, I don't even know how many guys are left after that. They've got to, try to find some shooting to put around these guys that they can get for cheap. But like you said, with that top end talent, there's no doubt that they're going to be in the picture. They're going to be competing to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and maybe even the finals. So I want to see how they fill out the rest of that roster. I really like, bringing back Mike Scott. I think just as a scoring option, a backup for, I like that. And this defense could be one of the best we've seen in a long time. So I'm curious to see, with that in play, can they produce enough offense on the other end? And I don't think they'll really have a problem with Embiid, but when Embiid's not on the floor, what can they do? It's going to be fun to see what they can do.
Oh, yeah. It was tough to see them lose J.J. Redick, someone that had been a staple in their rotation for a couple of years now. But he is moving on to a very interesting situation. The Pelicans, I mean, with David Griffin, are making some of the best moves that you can really look at across the league. So JJ Redick comes in, and of course the Sixers are going to suffer from losing a floor spacer of that caliber. But for the Pelicans, I would hate to be the one having to guard a Drew Holiday, Zion Williamson pick and roll with JJ Redick on the wing. That's going to be absolutely brutal to have to defend against. But overall, I mean, for JJ Redick getting another contract at his age, 2 years, $26 million, it goes to show how well he's taking care of himself and how valuable of a shooter he is. I mean, he's in his mid-30s already. He's not athletic. He's not the fastest guy around, but he's still getting $14 million a season at his age. So very impressive for him. I think it's worth it just because of the floor spacing he provides. He's never going to stop running, and he's just going to be a value player, a good veteran at every juncture. So good signing right there. Getting into basically the final stretch of this podcast here, Ian, I just wanted to look at maybe a couple other names that are a little bit lower on the totem pole, but are still very good value signings here. We covered Sammy Lamb already. Ed Davis is another good one. But I'm interested to see what Dwayne Dedmon can do with the Kings here. As a floor spacer for 3 years and $40 million, he should be the guy we're looking for to put next to Bagley or Giles in the front court, and then Fox and Hield and those other guys. So good fit there, I think. He should be able to run a little bit and shoot, which is what they need from the center position, building off of that unexpected campaign last year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Dedmon's a great signing. I thought he was going to be one of the most, best signings of the offseason, no matter where he wound up. I mean, watching him closely in Atlanta the last couple of years, I mean, just how he developed his game. I mean, he's a great player, great person, works really hard. So I was excited to see him get a contract like that. And I'm excited to see. I mean, I thought Sacramento did well for themselves. I mean, Dwayne Dedmon, Trevor Ariza, Corey Joseph. I can't say I loved the Harrison Barnes signing. Opting out to sign back for just a little bit less and decline that deal. It's but admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of his. But they've put depth and talent on this team with a lot of young pieces that have the potential to turn into something. And with a new coach and hopefully a new system, they can build something here over the next couple of years. I know they got all these guys on few-year contracts. They got another year of De'Aaron Fox getting better, another year of Buddy Hield getting better, another year for Marvin Bagley. And if Harry Giles can show any type of ability to sustain the what he showed at the end of last year, just as a good backup big, I think these guys can be a competitive team in the West. I'm not willing to say that they could really push anybody in the West, but they can make the playoffs and see where they can go from there. I like it.
Oh, I'm with you. One more value signing, I'm not sure is maybe the best value, but it might be a little bit underrated and under the radar here. Last guy we'll look at here today is Ricky Rubio with the Suns. They've been in need of a point guard for, I think, about 16 years now. So I'm glad that they actually shored up that position with somebody that's going to be very smart, very savvy, and somebody that can kind of come alongside Devin Booker. Ricky Rubio has been a pro for a long time, even back to Spain in his teenage years. So he has a lot of experience. He's seen a lot. He's done a lot. And Devin Booker can only benefit from having a guy like that next to him to show him the ropes and also provide a little bit of, playmaking, a little bit of shooting, in a pinch. So, and also a good defender, which we know Devin Booker doesn't want anything to do with defense. So pretty good signing here, not, going to set the world on fire or anything, but I think for the Suns, at least they shored up that position of need and they can finally get that out of the way and focusing on just getting out of the basement of the NBA for, the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that was something that they, like you said, they've needed it for a long time. And they want to show Devin Booker that they're committed to building a team around him. I agree with kind of, you said it in passing. I don't know how much of a value this contract is. Feels like this is what they needed to offer to prime away from Indiana, who I was the other shooter that was pursuing him for a deal in a similar range. But I think that he should add. He obviously fills a position of need for them, and we'll see how they can kind of continue to get better moving forward as these young players develop. Obviously, they've missed on a few draft picks, with guys like Josh Jackson. But I like what they did with, they got Bridges. They picked up Saric. They got Baines now to back up Aiden. So, I like they're at least kind of trying to build some depth. They bring in Rubio to fill this position of need. And, hopefully over the next couple of years, they can continue to add to this young team. And, like you said, get themselves out of the bottom of the West and be competitive again, because that's obviously a place where basketball has been, really important to the community. And those Steve Nash and Mark Stoudemire teams, that seems like ages ago that they were, competing for a championship. And it would be great to see them get another team again that can compete.
Absolutely. I'm totally on board with that. We'll have to see what else they do. They still do have Kelly Oubre Jr. as restricted free agent. It would be nice for them to bring him back. Not sure if they're going to be able to bring him back without overpaying him, but, to be continuing on that one. Hopefully.
Yeah, actually, sorry to cut you off. I was seeing some stuff. I'm not sure. As far as I understand, they might have to make some moves to fit Rubio in at the number they signed him. And still keep Oubre's hold. I don't know if they can't, that means that they're going to renounce those restricted rights, and they could obviously bring him back still. But if not, that would make him an unrestricted free agent, which would just be another interesting piece in this whole free agency saga. I'd have to imagine they're going to try their best. If it's unloading small amounts of salary, sending out a second-round pick, or paying someone to take on one of their younger guys, I think they can do it. But it's just, I thought that was an interesting wrinkle in trying to get Rubio at this number. So we'll see. Hopefully they can, because they traded for Oubre. I think they want to bring him back. I think he's a piece for this young team, but if they can get it done.
Hopefully they can. They need all the help they can get, and he's just another young asset that actually still has some growing to do at only age 23. So we've only covered a little bit of the madness that occurred yesterday. We were only able to get to a few names, of course, because there are over 200 players that are free agents or could have been free agents this season. But I was glad to be able to get through at least a few of them here today with Ian. Brings a lot of great insight from his experience in the NBA, time with the Hawks. So in closing, man, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on to Business Casual, offer really great thoughts and opinions here. Love to have you on again at some point down the road. And wish you all the best as you continue your professional career.
Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate you having me. It was a lot of fun talking to you today about this wild couple days, or wild 24 hours we've had, and we'll see what happens over the next couple days.
Absolutely, man. One last thing before you go. I like to give my guests an opportunity to kind of shout out their social media or things they're working on. So anything you wanted to talk about, what you're working on or what you're pursuing here to the audience?
I don't have anything right now. I'm working on looking for my next opportunity in the NBA. If you ever want to say hi, though, it's at @McKiernan, IMCKIERNAN on Twitter. So you can give me a shout out there. Appreciate you having me, though.
Cool. And have I been pronouncing your name wrong at this point? I called you. Been calling you Ian a little bit earlier, but did I have that a little bit mixed up? I just wanted to address that, so maybe I can get it right.
You got it spot on from the beginning, man. Ian McKiernan, that's how you say it.
Gotcha. Yeah. I thought I heard you say I'm Ian at one point or something, so I just wanted to make sure. But yeah, this is going to do it for our podcast number 68. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Kawhi's still on the market. There's still a lot of great players available for teams to pick up. So we'll be covering it on Business Casual. If you want to follow us, that's BC Basketball 2 on Instagram and Twitter, and then bcbasketball.info. On the website, we'll have a bunch of information to keep you guys up to date. So until next time, enjoy the free agent madness, and we'll be back to cover the league very soon.